Today we're reading Genesis chapters 37, verses 12 through 36. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks. Bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they're grazing their flocks?" "They moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went to find his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they had plotted to kill him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns. They say a fiercest animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the desert. Don't lay a hand on him," Reuben said, "to rescue him from them and take him back to his father." So Joseph came to his brothers. They stripped him of his robe, richly ornamented robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty, there was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw carven innocents coming from the Gilgal, their camels loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh. And they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Juhan said to his brothers, What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Aramates and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, in flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when minted myrrh chains came by out of the cistern, Joseph up from the cistern. They sold him for 20 scoops of silver to an emissary who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern, they saw Joseph was not there. He tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robes. They slaughtered a goat and dipped the robes in the blood. They took the ornamented robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it's your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe." Some fiercest animal surely torn Joseph to pieces. Then Jacob tore the clothes and put on a sackcloth and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "in mourning I will go down to the grave to my son." So the father wept for him. Meanwhile, Midian sold Joseph to Potiphar, one part officer's captain of the guard.
I'm just going to say that was a mouthful. Well done. Now, at this point, once again, Cress asks for God to make these words his words and not my words. And when I say that, I truly mean it. Please fill me with your thoughts rather than mine. Amen. So if you look at what it says in our bulletin, it says that I'm going to talk about Joseph. And now Joseph is an attainable goal for us. Because if we look at most of the people in the Bible, specifically the New Testament, you go right to Jesus, unattainable. That's perfection. We cannot be perfect people. We can only strive to be perfect people. So, when I say Joseph, I'm going to back up into the Old Testament. She read a whole bunch of Genesis there, and I'm going to talk about that little piece of Genesis plus some more. Now, I know some people over there are going, "Oh, really? He's going to go on that long?" Yes, I may go on that long, but it shouldn't be too bad, because I'm going to start with Abraham. Oh, yeah. We'll get to Joseph, but I'm going to start with Abraham, because Abraham is considered the first forefather of the children of God. The first. All right? He was married to Sarah. And Sarah and he, after a very long period of time and with God's grace, had a child. But before all that happened, Abraham came from a place called Mesopotamia. We're going to take you back to 10th grade geography here. Came from Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia means simply the land between two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. And God went to Abraham and said, leave this place and go to Canaan, which is also Palestine. So kind of gives you an idea of where that is, Israel and that whole that would become. So there's Abraham and his wife Sarah, and they have finally come up with a child, Isaac, and they are very happy. There's another one in there, Ishmael, but we won't really get to Ishmael. We've talked about him before. Isaac is the one that I'm worried about because he's the second of the forefathers. All right? And when I say forefathers, there's really three fathers, but forefathers, and then we'll talk about one of the sons. So there you've got Abraham, and he takes Isaac after all these years of love, and Isaac has to feel like he's a loved child, and he goes with his dad off to do something, and suddenly you got to figure Isaac realized that my dad is going to sacrifice me. He's actually going to give me back to God. So Isaac is laying on the altar. Abraham's about ready to take him out. God says, no, I'll give you a lamb. You can go ahead and sacrifice the lamb rather than Isaac. So Isaac, if you were going to use Isaac as one of your people that you're going to go for, gosh, you got to figure he's got a lot of post-traumatic stress. I mean, he can't be your guy. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's a problem right there. He's got to carry that with him for a long time. In fact, Isaac has problems finding a wife. They got to go back to Mesopotamia to find him a wife. And it's the child of Laban. All right? So Isaac is now with Rebekah. All right? Actually not a child, it's his sister. All right? Didn't fill me with the right information. All right? So you've got Rebekah and you've got Isaac. And we're really only worrying about one of those children because there's two. Esau and the one that we all know, and that's Jacob. All right? So is it Jacob I'm supposed to be emulating? Is it? A guy that ends up being so bad that many of the people in his family, those relatives, want to take him out? I don't think so. What has he done? Well, first off, back then, you were going to give the firstborn in your family your inheritance. And in this case, they're twins. So Esau is only like a few minutes ahead of his brother Jacob. All right? So Jacob pretty much has the advantage because his mom loves him the best. And he's probably smarter and wittier than his brother Esau, who was kind of a hunter guy, right? So the brother decides early on, I'm going to get this inheritance. And he cheats him out of his brother's inheritance right off the bat because his brother was hungry, so he traded it for food. Later on, when Isaac is old and blind, his wife goes to Jacob and says, here, wrap this around your arm. Take this to your dad. He's going to give you his blessings because he's going to think you're Esau. He's going to think you are. So just go ahead and lie to him. That doesn't seem right, does it? Is there a rule where if you can cheat your older brother out of his inheritance, it's yours? It seems like there was at that time because it happens a lot and everyone just sort of accepts it. Jacob lies to his dad gives him his inheritance, and then you got to figure that's got to bother a lot of people. One of them is Laban. Remember Laban, that's Rebekah's brother back in Mesopotamia. He's got a couple of daughters. And Jacob decides he really likes Rachel. That's one of the younger daughters, all right? So he goes to Laban and he says, hey, I'll work for her. I'll become an indentured servant for her if I can have Rachel. And so Laban says, all right, So he worked 7 years for the hand of Rachel. And the night when he finally gets the opportunity to marry Rachel, who do you think he marries? He marries Leah. What? Laban has taken his older daughter and in the dark given him to Jacob. Given the daughter to Jacob. The wrong daughter. You know? So Jacob, instead of saying, wait, that can't work. That doesn't work like that. He says, all right, I'll work another 7 years for Rachel. All right? So he's already married Leah. He's got some kids with Leah. He's actually got some kids with her handmaiden too, which is odd. And then finally, after 7 years, Rachel. He also has children with Rachel's handmaiden. What? He's got 12 kids, or going to end up with 12 kids, all right? From different wives, different things, different happenings, but there needed to be kids back then. So you got to figure there was some concessions made. Sure, you can sleep with her, or you can sleep with her. Wow, it seems strange. So Jacob, in doing all this, has finally sort of redeemed himself, but I still don't think Jacob is the guy we should be trying to emulate. So what's going to happen next? All of these women that Jacob are with ends up with 12 kids. The 12 tribes of Israel. Now, why are they called the 12 tribes of Israel? Because Jacob, one of the things that he has done is he has wrestled with God by a river. And when he finally finishes, God gives him a new name. And what is that name? Israel. One who fights with God. That is what he calls him. So the sons of Israel, he has 12 of them, and they will become the tribes of Israel. And in that group, one of the wives, Rachel, finally has a son, Joseph. And Joseph is the guy I'm going to be looking for today. And I just want to walk down those stairs and come out there. Joseph is the guy I'm going to be looking at today. Joseph is the guy that was read about earlier. He was the guy that was in fact the favorite of Jacob. He was his favorite. And you got to figure that's got to bother some of the other brothers, because all the inheritance goes to the firstborn. But you've got lots of firstborns in there. You've got 4 moms, and each of them had a firstborn. So there've got to be a lot of guys in that group that are going, no, it should be mine. This should be mine. It's not bad enough that you got to figure Joseph was funny, he was good looking, and he had that coat that his dad had given him with those sleeves. You know, all of those guys are looking at that coat going, oh, man, he's going to get the inheritance and that coat. And you got to figure that Joseph wasn't that easy to be around, you know, because when they got the chance, they did decide they were going to kill Joseph. All right, so he couldn't have been that good a guy, because, I mean, these brothers, are you all brothers out there? You don't want to kill your brother, do you? Sometimes you're really mad at him, but you don't want to kill him. And they wanted to kill Joseph, but instead they decided, you know what we should do? We should take that coat of his, we should cover it in blood, and we should sell him into slavery. That seems nice, all right? So there's Joseph. He gets sold into slavery by Ishmaelites. They take him and sell him to the captain of the guards in Egypt. So it doesn't take Joseph long before Joseph, and that's why I'm saying Joseph is the guy that I'm emulating, because Joseph seems to take advantage of every situation that is thrown at him. If I got thrown in a ditch, I might just go, Joseph didn't. When I got sold into slavery, Joseph, did he just give up? No. He makes the best of every situation he gets. He makes the best of it. So he's in this household in Egypt, and it doesn't take him long before he's like in charge of this household, because he's funny, he's witty, he's good looking, and he's good looking enough that, the head of the household's wife, you know what happens? She wants a little of that Joseph. And Joseph says no. Joseph is strong enough to say no. And if you look at any of his dad, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, they never said no. But there's Joseph saying, no, I'm not going to do that. You're married to like my boss. And so she gets it all going around, sort of a blackmail thing, and he gets thrown into jail. So there's Joseph in jail. And what does Joseph do in jail? He kind of takes over. I mean, he figures out a way of being well-liked. He figures out a way of getting things done. And that's when he really starts in that attempt to tell people what their dreams mean. And there are, in fact, 2 criminals with him that he tells them what their dreams mean. Regrettable, one of them is that he's going to die. And the other one is pretty good. And when he gets released, he goes to the Pharaoh. And when the Pharaoh starts having some dreams himself, this criminal says, you know, there's a dude in prison now that can tell you what those dreams mean. So he gets released from prison and he goes to work for the Pharaoh. And this dream basically says that they're going to have 7 years where everything is good. And then they're going to have 7 years where everything's not so good. So during that first 7 years, they start putting grain away. So that they're going to have food when they don't have any food. So after 7 years, when they don't start having food, that famine is everywhere, even up in Canaan. We're getting back to his brothers. So the brothers, not being able to eat, they decide they're going to go to Egypt and come up with some grain. So who do they run into but their brother? But you got to figure by that time he's got a beard, he's older. His brother was actually sold into slavery, so you're not going to look at the guy in charge and go, hey, you're our brother that we sold into slavery. You're not going to think that. You're going to think, oh, please, give us some grain. Well, when they said that to Joseph, Joseph figured, these are my brothers. What should I do? Now, many brothers, I think, given that same situation, boop, they would have popped him in the eyes. You know, Joseph would have said, I'm not going to give you any grain. But he didn't. He put them in jail for 3 days. I mean, that seems fair, because he accused them of spying. And when they got out of jail, he kept one of them behind and said, I'm going to give you enough grain to make it back to Canaan, and, you know, I'm going to keep your brother here as sort of collateral. So as they're making their way back to Canaan, they open up the grain and notice that all the money they paid for that grain is in with the grain. So they are so afraid to go back to Egypt because they figure that they're going to get accused for stealing. All right? But time passes, they run out of grain, and they decide, we got to go back. And when they go back, just like Joseph had asked, he asked them to bring his brother, Benjamin, who's actually his real brother from his mom and dad. But he wanted to see him and make sure that nothing had gone bad. So they make it back with Benjamin. He's very happy that he gets to see Benjamin. He's very glad that he's alive. And Joseph decides this is all going to be good, you know? But he still doesn't tell him who he is. And they are so afraid at every turn. So when he sends them back to Canaan, he puts his measuring cup, silver, into the grain. Right? So, what do you figure they thought? Once again, they're going to be accused of stealing, and everything is going to go wrong. So here we've got Joseph, who has never really done anything bad except for maybe nanny poo-poo with a coat. He's never done anything bad, and they're still incredibly afraid. Incredibly afraid. And they went back, and when they got back, there they are with Joseph. There he is with his brothers, and he finally decides to tell them who he is. And what do you think they did? They were, well, I'm sure happy, but they were still scared, wouldn't you be? You sold your brother into slavery. He's always sticking back there, going to do something bad to you, but he doesn't. All right, so now here I am. I'm in Egypt. All the brothers are in Egypt. Why is that story in the Bible? Why is it? Because of God's way. You always hear it. God works in mysterious ways. Well, here are all of these forefathers working their way down. God has promised land to all of the people of Israel, the children of Israel. He's promised that land, but in order to get them that land, he's got to get them all in one place. So it's Egypt. So he sends Joseph to Egypt to set up shop, to get some of those people from Canaan, to get those people what will become, Palestine, into Egypt, so that he can get them there so that ultimately those people can be freed to go to their land. So in this case, not only does God work in mysterious ways, but Joseph has carried out God's will in a way that no one would have seen coming. And that's the way it is for all of us. When something bad happens, Joseph kept making something good out of it. And then when the people of Israel made it to Egypt and became enslaved, then God makes something good of it. So we never know when that is going to happen. We can only pray that it does.